Welcome to Southeast Asia Development Symposium 2022, and welcome to this deep dive conversation on enabling empowered women for Asia's sustainable recovery. I want to begin by drawing your attention first to the term empowered women rather than the often used term of empowering women. And here's why. Although empowering has been associated with the emancipation of women, it often carries with it the risk of male saviorism. That is, the assumption that women are not yet there and need to be saved, to be taught, to be guided, to be trained, to be empowered by men in order for economies to thrive. So that's male saviorism, males as women's saviors. Another problem of magnitude when we use the term empowering women is white saviorism. That is, we believe that good white women are needed to help empower Asian women or other non-white women. Hi, I'm Catheryn Khoo, and I'm a gender expert and consultant for the United Nations World Tourism Organization, or better known as UNWTO. I also happen to be a professor of tourism here in Australia, where I am based. My own work on and with women in tourism found that women, even in rural areas of developing nations, are already empowered through the process of becoming aware of their positionality as women, through overcoming struggles to create their own businesses, through acting outside gender stereotypes, and through changing their environments. So these women are very much already empowered and don't need the talk of being empowering, of empowering them. So I believe strongly that we cannot talk about inclusive, sustainable recovery for Asia without shifting gender equality discussions from empowering women to enabling already empowered women. Because, and this is why, because starting from the positionality that women do not need to be talked into being empowered means we can immediately begin doing real work to harness women's powerful resourcefulness, influences, and resilience. Starting from this understanding that women in Asia and Asian women are not helpless and passive means we can accelerate work corporations and governments that are currently doing to ensure quality and greater opportunities for women. Starting from this empowered framework means we can focus less on the mechanisms that will facilitate empowerment and more on the actionable strategies to growing economies and improving communities. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is the position we want to begin from today. I'd like you now, if you're joining us, wherever you are, to now say this to yourself: empowered women, not empowering women. Understand what this means when you say this. One more time, if you're ready: empowered women, not empowering women. This difference can be monumental. So one last time: empowered women, not empowering women. It is this position of empowered women that our speakers will begin their short presentations from. I won't take up valuable time reading their illustrious bios to you, as you have these online, but I do want to give them each 3 to 5 minutes to show you how they think they've been enabling empowered women in the work that they do. You are welcome, audience, to ask and dig deeper. Hopefully, we'll even get 1 or 2 uncomfortable questions from all of you. If you have questions either now, during, or after their presentations, please send them through. Prachi is standing by. Prachi is a diversity strategist with World Women Tourism, and she is ready to take your questions and collate them for our speakers. I would now invite our first speaker, Pratima Amonkar, who is the area lead for cloud and AI business strategy at Microsoft Asia Pacific, to show us specifically how digital transformation can enable empowered women for Asia's sustainable recovery, even when research has shown us that there is such a thing known as the gender digital divide, and a scary thing called the Gender Digital Divide Index. So, Pratima, the floor is yours. I should say the room is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catheryn, and absolutely inspired by what you're just saying. I've completely changed my lexicon right now immediately. So hello, everybody. I'm Pratima Amonkar, and to be inclusive of people of all abilities, here's a visual descriptor. I'm an Indian woman with curly black hair, wearing plain red top and a gold set of gold hoop earrings. So thank you for this opportunity to speak with this distinguished panel. We have great speakers on this panel, and this landmark event really at the Southeast Asia Development Symposium for Southeast Asia's recovery. So enabling empowered women for Asia's sustainable recovery. What a beautiful, rich topic, and thank you again for including me here. So folks, as we look back, there is no question that the last 20 months have been a catalyst for real structural change across every industry, every company, every country that you think of. COVID, I know I'm not stating anything new, everybody knows this. COVID has really created a new age of digital disruption. And this has really put the power of digital to put people at the center of everything. It's more about people now going forward. And nations have sort of broken down all the barriers, all the silos. And you're right, absolutely, Catheryn. And more nations are harnessing this power of digital to deliver actual social value. In fact, as per our experience and several research has shown us that 8 out of 10 government leaders surveyed say that investment in digital technology has vastly increased since the pandemic. Again, nothing new and nothing unique about this whole thing. We all know about this. But what are we doing really fundamentally? Fundamentally, we are moving to a new cloud era, one of ubiquitous computing and artificial intelligence. Cloud, AI, data, supported society in the time of greatest need the past 2 years. So now we find that we're moving and driving a shift from citizen centric to citizen driven services. And notice the difference in the words here. And this is really, according to me, so aligned with what you just talked about, the theme of moving from empowering to enabling the empowered, actually going forward with that as a theme. And that, according to us, is the era that we will now move into, which will experience much more digitization over the next 10 years than what we have even seen in the last 30, 40 years. And what we have actually seen is a need for more than just digital transformation. We are seeing an urgent and clear move to what we say is digital acceleration. It's that kind of a urgency that has come in. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, it has taught us that no business is resilient, 100%. But the businesses that are fortified with capability, with digital capability, are much more resilient than those that are not. So recent research has explored how COVID-19 has impacted the ways government leaders view technology as a catalyst for change, and how they have actually handled the pandemic and as we look forward. And we have seen the advantages that digital transformation brings to customers. And this data gives us concrete insight on how government agencies have handled these challenges. The pandemic has uncovered areas where governments have the clarity to invest. And given the lack of critical infrastructure to manage all these crises, and how our customers are forced to evolve their businesses to manage these, to manage the processes that are coming up. So basically what I'd like to say is that new business models are emerging and new companies are emerging in this whole thing. But unfortunately, the reality is that what has been accelerated by the pandemic, which is sad, is the inequality. prior to the pandemic, as a society, we had been making progress against all the UN SDGs, etc. And we know, that there was a digital divide, but clearly we can see with data from multiple sources, some of this progress has gone in reverse. And the reality is that most impacted are women and minorities and the underserved across. And that is why it is extremely vital for everybody who's logged in, especially policy developers and people who are in the space of the government. We need to create inclusive economic opportunities in this digital world. And that is where the power of cloud, data, AI can truly help to enable empowered women for Asia's sustainable recovery. And my key message in conclusion in this segment is that core to this enablement will be a data-driven policy and government and skilling for the future. Back to you, Catheryn. Catheryn?
Members of the audience, if you have any questions at all for Pratima, please forward them through right this moment. Pratima, thank you very much for that. I already have questions for you and I can't wait to ask you those at the end of this session. Our next presenter is Dr. Cherry Huang, who is now the General Manager for Global Merchant Partnership at Alipay. When research shows that women make up the majority of small and medium businesses, and that these businesses were the most impacted during the pandemic, how does Alipay and the ANT Group enable industry recovery and empowered women with digital innovations? Cherry, the room is yours.
Thank you, Catheryn. It's such a great honor to be presenting ANT Group, speak amongst all those very established fellow women panelists today. Thank you so much for inviting me. And today, especially what I'm really thrilled is it is World Women Tourism. I have to say tourism literally in my blood and a topic very to my heart because since the start of my career, actually, I played many roles across the online travel, hospitality. After my PhD in the hotel and tourism management, I was a part-time lecturer in the hotel and tourism industry, academia as well, because I'm really very interested with this industry. However, I want to look at the bigger world because I feel like being a player operating in the industry, sometimes you are in the forest, you don't see the whole big picture. So I moved to the ANT Group since 2016 and become an enabler to enable the industry and help our partner and customer with their digital transformation, particularly in the travel industry. So back to 2016, when I just joined and introduced Alipay, a QR-based digital payment in the Southeast Asia, I have to say, my challenge is I have to educate everybody what is about the QR code because everybody say, okay, we understand the card, but what is the QR code? What is supposed to do? I think after this, during this pandemic, we all learned, right? Everybody has to scan, trace together, scan QR to enter into the premises, etc. So there's a lot of things that are changing. So for this, what we are doing at that time, when we have a QR based, we are actually enable the travelers, the tourists can use their own home and home-based app like Alipay back to China. They're very used to use it in their daily life. When they travel cross-border, they can still use it. So make it easy for them to travel, make it convenient, same time connect with the merchants and those travelers to make it easy. So we were quite successful, I have to say, before the pandemic. But when the pandemic came, everything on hold. Actually, we were struggling during the last 2 years when we talk about the cross-border traveling. I think most of the travel industry suffers that as well. But however, this also pushes us to be more innovative, to think about what we can do more. So we start to introduce what we call the Alipay Plus. Alipay Plus, so it's we introduced that during the Singapore FinTech Festival back to November 2021, so a few months ago. So when we introduced it, I got a call from some of our clients saying that, oh, I couldn't find the Alipay Plus app. Can you tell me where do I download this app? So I tell them, no, it's not an app. Actually, it's a payment and marketing solutions that we introduced to the marketplaces. We realized that there's many businesses, especially SMEs, actually truly need during this period of time to be able to do an online transfer of the money and still to maintain their business online. So they have those quite a needs. Alongside, because the borders are gradually open and a lot of countries has already published their policy for the opening up of the borders. So the international mobility is coming back. So a lot of offline merchants, a lot of SMEs ask us when can the tourists come back as well. So we introduced these Alipay Plus solutions to help them to enable online and offline digital payment and the marketing solutions for them. So I give you some examples where in Singapore, we're much getting ready to welcome the tourists from Malaysia, for example, back. And the Malaysia travelers can use Touch and Go e-wallet from Malaysia to use in the same merchants that in the past accept the Alipay through the Alipay Plus solution instead of doing another integration, make it easy for them. And another thing is we are looking forward for the GCash from Philippines, and the tourists from Philippines come back to use the GCash. And of course, from South Korea, Kakao Pay. This is just some examples we're doing at the moment through the Alipay Plus solutions to promote the digital inclusion and financial inclusion in the region and globally. So now we talk about a bit for women, particularly in the SME in these cross-border tourism sectors. I want to share some of the number. Of course, this report is a little bit old. It's back to the United Nations, published in 2016. It's about 60 million of women. They own and operate business in the ASEAN countries, account for almost 10% of ASEAN population. We can imagine after 6 years, we're sitting in the 2020, this number will change dramatically, increase much higher number. So from Ant Group, we do realize that, again, with the past 6 years that we're working in the ASEAN countries introduce this cross-border tourism, I encountered many female entrepreneurs, a lot of from SMEs, whether from the during stands or from the 7-Elevens back to Thailand. I met many of the female professionals. We realized that they do need a lot of support. So that's why we have introduced from Ant Group a 10 by 1,000 Tech for Inclusion program. This is a FinTech training program. It's a partnership between IFC and Alipay, make it a KPI to ensure that a certain percentage of student intake are female every year. We're trying to use this to make sure that the financial inclusion and the FinTech technology inclusion training program can have more female professionals in being included as well. Another very important program we introduced from Alipay in China, is together with the Development Foundation, we launched the IDOL program. Later on, I have a video to show that. This is a step, especially for those female in the poverty areas, because in the past they have to travel to far away to leave their home, leave their kids, families behind. But now by these long distance learnings, they are learning the AI technicals. So they can from the further distance actually to support their families rather than traveling far away from this. So I would like to show this video. This is also end of my presentation. Look, please.
我们这个工作最主要就是为未来的大数据，然后人工智能这一块做一个基础的数据标注。之前没有怎么接触电脑，现在有机会接触到电脑，也从上面学会到很多电脑的一些基本操作啊。
在
在外打工主要就是牵挂孩子吧，在家的话能照顾孩子，能陪在孩子身边，而且也有了一份工作吧。
Thank you. Thank you for that, Cherry. And thank you for sharing with us that video. I've got questions for A Idol later on as well. Members of the audience, if you have questions for Cherry, please send your questions through right now. Now, the latest UNWTO report on women in Asia and the Pacific emphasizes the lack of available sex disaggregated statistical data and highlights this urgency to implement data benchmarking. As CEO of Aptamind Partners, Aradhana Khowala will now talk us through one of my favorite topics, data and objective research for enabling empowered women. Aradhana, the room is yours.
Thank you, Catheryn. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get controversial at the outset. They say if you can't measure something, it doesn't exist. I say they're wrong. Seriously, I haven't lost it yet, although it is a distinct possibility given it's 6 a.m. here in the UK. If you can't measure something, it doesn't exist. I say not true, because you see, the fact is our society is chronically dysfunctional. And no matter how much of data and objective research you throw at someone, denial and delusion often numbs us to the extent that we invent fiction we rather believe than face up to the facts and truths we don't want to accept. Let me explain this with an example. So I'm here based in London in the UK, and there's a new research which is by Ipsos and the Global Institute for Women's Leadership at King's College in London, which has recently been published for International Women's Day. They did a survey of over 20,000 people across 30 different countries. The findings reveal that the British public are not only failing to accept the reality of inequality between women and men, they say it causes more harm than good. So 1 in 7 or 15% Brits think gender equality doesn't really exist. 1 in 5 Brits also think feminism does more harm than good. And 1 in 3 feel traditional masculinity is under threat because of all this noise surrounding women's empowerment. That's not it. Guess what? A quarter of Brits think the best way for women to deal with online abuse is to just ignore it. And 1 in 5 also think that many women overreact to online harassment. In other words, a minority continue to believe it's acceptable to act in abusive ways towards women, and they also blame women for the abuse we face. Think about it. A vocal minority, however small, can have this big, this disproportionate an impact. My dear friends, fact is fact, but perception is reality. Salt looks like sugar till you add it to your tea, right? Perception is based on opinion, your thoughts, and it comes from here, your mind. And unless we change our mindset, there is no way in hell that we can impact real change. Is data perfect? Far from it. But even imperfect, incomplete, and inadequate data is less damaging than the wreckage we cause with no data at all. And this is exactly why we need data intelligence, and objective research, so we can scare the hell out of people, scare the hell out of us. Because above all else, what it does is highlight this perception gap, a gap that must be first overcome if we want to make gender equality a reality. Now, I'm a global expert on tourism, and in tourism specifically, one of the biggest myths is that gender equality, well, we don't really have a problem, right? Because in our company, we love women employees. We have unconscious bias training. We do employee satisfaction surveys every year. We have women affinity groups. We have D&I leaders. Or for God's sake, we also celebrate International Women's Day every 8th of March. So how can we have a problem? The good part is we are one of the most gender diverse sectors in the world, with more than 50% women in the workforce. But despite an increased awareness of gender imbalance, if you look at the needle on women in leadership, be it in the C-suite or board of directors, it hasn't moved. And it hasn't moved in the last 40 years. So a lot of what I do is look at this time-worn topic through of gender equality through the revealing lens of data. And one of the things we did in the last year is we looked at the largest 200 plus publicly listed companies across all parts of tourism. So I'm talking hotels, airlines, cruises, casinos, OTAs, F&B companies, the whole lot. These companies have operations in more than 130, 150 countries, some of them. They employ millions and have a market cap of trillions. And the worst thing is, I think everything that we suspected was wrong is all true, because the old and familiar problems of discrimination, and not forget about the glass ceiling, it's a concrete ceiling, is pretty much with us everywhere we go. And for all the talk that the world is changing as we know it, I think there is persistent unfairness everywhere in society. Women enter the workforce in equal numbers as men. By the time they get to mid-level management, it falls to 40%. It's 33% by the time they're at what I call as a senior level management or an SVP level. And that's where the concrete ceiling really becomes a reality, because it's only a scant 19% of women who are in the executive level, or what we call the C-suite. And it gets worse still the minute you go to the CEO level, because of all of these companies, only 5% are women CEOs. At the board of director level, it's not very different as well. Only 6% of all chairs of these publicly listed companies are female. Now, let me be very clear. Gender equality, it's not a tourism problem. That is a convenient misrepresentation, because women, women of color, are undermined, underemployed, overlooked, and othered everywhere. It's everywhere. The question is, what will you do about it? What will we do about it? So circling back and finishing up with data, the idea is not to have data to predict and control. Let us have data to educate and liberate. The idea is not to have data to prove points or even point fingers. Let us have data to build a case and fight misperceptions, especially those in our heads. Let us not have data only to research and inquire. Let us have data to commit and create impact. And finally, let us not have data only to tick the box or even think outside the box. Let us have data so we can change the mindsets and make the transition from empowering women to enabling empowered women. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aradhana. Thank you so much for that. Wow, your stats, your initial stats about the Brits, they made me mad and swear under breath just as well I was on mute.
And it's not just Britain, it's true for a lot of the countries in Western Europe that was part of the study, but because I'm British, I can say these things.
Yes. Now, thank you for that. And members of the audience, again, I'm sure you have lots of questions for Aradhana. Please send your questions through right now. Our last presenter is my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Nisha Bakar, whom I have worked on many platforms with and who co-founded World Women Tourism, who is the main enabler for this deep dive conversation. Now, one of the 5 thematic areas in the UNWTO Global Report on Women in Tourism is education and training. And Nisha will be sharing with us how what World Women Tourism is doing specifically in this space of training and capacity building to enable empowered women for Asia's sustainable recovery, bearing in mind what I had said earlier about male and white saviorism. After her presentation, Nisha and I will co-facilitate the deep dive conversation. We will be asking your questions from the audience. So if you have them, please, again, send them through. Nisha, the room is yours.
Thank you, Catheryn. And thank you for the introduction. And usually, as a spirited campaigner of women's empowerment, I get really excited when I speak. But after Pratima, Cherry, yourself, and Aradhana, oh my God, I am injected with too much of excitement. So I'm getting carried away just speaking about the economic empowerment of women through capacity building and training. We know that the whole economic or social economic transformation of women is a big transformational process in many initiatives, but I'm an ardent believer that one of the very important initiatives is via capacity building and training. So whether we are a policymaker in this room, or whether we are an entrepreneur, or whether we are a hotelier decision maker, I think it's very important at this point in time that when we curate or craft our training programs, we need to think about how can we promote access of women into decision-making positions. Number two, to think of how we can foster more women business leaders and entrepreneurs. And thirdly, how can we groom more women to be policymakers? Because the statistics shows that only 17% of the tourism ministers worldwide is women. So how do we get more out there? So how can our trainings help to deliver that? And at World Women Tourism, we have found some gaps in terms of training and capacity building that I would like to share. But adding on to what Aradhana has also mentioned, I want to talk a little bit or share a slide here in Asia. If you look at the statistics, right, in Asia Pacific, only 27% of women actually go up to the higher ranking position compared to the other regions of the world. We need to think about this. Why is this happening here in the Asia Pacific? What do we need to do to address this problem? And look at below the red section. India had the third lowest global representation of women. It's not just a cultural barrier or a constraint, but there are other impediments that we need to think about. One of it is the psychological constraints that women face over here, or the capacity of women here. We have to pump that up a little bit. So even this research, Beam research, showed that if you look at the reasons why leadership positions are not in favor of women, one of it is about self-development. And if you look at it, it's a lack of network. It's not that we don't have network. We are really good at relationship building, but we just don't know how to bring networking into the business world. Right? And so how do we address that? And the final thing that you see over here is about communication skills. Not that women, we can't communicate, but what is it that we are lacking in the business world in terms of business communication, whether it is negotiation, right? We need to think about all these and start to address that in capacity building. So one of the three points that I raised here is what we researched and found in terms of missing in training and development programs. Again, it's not that we don't have training and development programs, but it is lacking in the sense that when we design training and development program, we do not place importance to look at women as a human capital. What do we need to enhance and leverage women as human capital in an organization or even at the governmental level? The next is that we lack the high level skills training, including the soft skills. So what are these skills? We need to identify that. And I'll share some of these with you. And thirdly, there is a lack of formal training for certain capacities within an organization or even to become a policy maker. Right. So we looked at some of these training, and the first one that I want to highlight, it is very, very important to think about gender sensitive training. How do we create a gender sensitive outreach to women when we go out there and produce training programs? How do we create female friendly training spaces? How do we minimize the distance to training facilities, specifically in the COVID situation? How do we create flexible training time so that it fits in nicely with the demands that women face at home and professionally? And how can we create greater gender dynamic curricula? Right? These are big questions that we need to think about. The next is entrepreneurship training. An OECD report said that women are 25% less likely than men to have the skills to start a business. And more research shows that even when it comes to funding, women get less than what we ask for. Is there something that is happening out here that we are struggling with pitching for business ideas, to reach out to venture capitalists? Lots of research are out there to show that women are lacking the skills to go out and bid and ask for venture capital funding, right? So what is going on there? There is a lack of skills, or is it confidence? We need to look into that. And also, networking and collaboration. Like I mentioned, it's not that we don't know how to build relationship. It's not that we don't know how to network, but how do we do networking in the business world? Again, research has shown that networking can increase or enhance a business performance by more than 30%. All right. So understanding the importance of how our business performance, whether it's money or whether it's productivity, can be enhanced through networking, we need to think a little bit more about how do we equip women with more of the networking and collaborative skills in the business world as well. And mentorship, I think, Aradhana, we have spoken a lot about, mentorship. But again, yes, I think we used to think that mentorship is for younger women, but more and more research is showing that mentorship is needed at all stages of our lives. So even if we have gone up to a higher level, we need mentors. And how do we go about looking for mentors? But Aradhana and we have spoken a lot more about it is not mentorship that women need, but it is sponsorship that we need at this point in time. Enough of mentorship. We need to start having conversations about how we can promote sponsorship. Do we need to teach women on how to do sponsorship? Do we need to groom organization on how to promote sponsorship and not mentoring or mentorship? Another area of training that we need to look at. And the other is, of course, diversity training. There is lots of research to show that when we have more diverse management, more diverse staff at the higher level, a company's productivity as well as innovation, creativity, and profitability goes up there. So how do we go to organizations and show, like what Aradhana has been speaking about in terms of data, intelligence? And how do we convince, how do we evaluate organizations in terms of their diversity index and to see if they are faring well or they are not faring enough? How do we bring these intelligence into organization and then train them to ensure that it is positive in terms of diversity? So, and the other is context-specific training. One of the things that we have realized is, especially in Asia Pacific, is many of the leadership and even women leadership programs are taken from the Western part of the world. And I think, Catheryn, you mentioned that earlier, the Yale School or the INSEAD business, for example, they're all taken from the Western-centric curricula, or it is a male-centric curricula. What is important here for us to understand is that the culture in Asia is very different from the Western culture. Our women leaders function differently from the leaders of the Western world. So can we have training which is more context specific to Asia Pacific or Southeast Asia? So we came out with Asian Women Leadership Program at World Women Tourism, and this is what we have been talking about, make it affordable for Asia, make it more Asian context specific so that our needs are addressed through our curriculum that we have proposed. So that's something to think about. It must be context specific, culture specific, and not something that is imported from the Western part of the world and say, learn this from the Western part of the world. And finally, I just want to round up by saying that there are a lot more that we can do. We need to invest more in knowledge and skills for the women in our part of the world. We have to invest in network, and how do we teach women in this part of the world to network in a business environment, but network intelligently, as well as how do we create more mentors and more sponsors in this part of the world so that we can scale the heights together. With that, thank you so much. I would then move on to the next section, which is having a highly energetic and engaging sessions with all the women over here. Are you ready?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you. Catheryn, I know you have been dying with the first question. Over to you first.
I guess my first question is channeled at all. Any one of you can answer that, to all, Cherry, Aradhana, and Pratima. I know Cherry touched a little bit on this with AIDOL, with women in the rural areas. So I think this is really important when we are talking about sustainable recovery, and with a lot of developing nations in Asia, where women are placed in non-urban areas, in non-hotspots, in rural areas. And so have there been any work done to, in terms of financial inclusion or digital inclusion and training inclusion, to be more inclusive of these women, to think of their needs, to how do we make it accessible to them? Because like I said, these are empowered women and they just need to be enabled. How do we enable them in the rural areas? Oh, I like it. The first question stumps the panelists.
I think Cherry,
why don't I take these questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think first of all, when we started this AI program, this is exactly to address those women are not in the city, in the urban areas. Actually, they are far from the cities. Just like you said, they do have certain educations. However, where can they find a job, which can be a long distance, but at the same time supporting the family? Of course, we've been also asked the question, can be scalable? Actually, the answer is yes. Actually, since the 2019, we introduced this program. We have already helped 8 poverty-striking areas improve this. We have created hundreds of the jobs for the AI related. I think what we need to really address down here is with the digital economy, education is definitely important, just like Dr. Nisha just shared. However, a tech-related training actually can definitely help those women, especially they're not in the urban areas, especially in the remote area. I think those are the things that the industry can think about through what we can do. And what is the benefit of a tech training is that it definitely can be remote, make it much easier. You have a laptop, a computer. Actually, there's a lot of things you can do for that. So this is something Group is very devoted to do. That's also why we have another program called 10 by 1,000. This program was not definitely designed for women, but once we started to want to create for 10 country or areas with 1,000 tech leaders in the future, we realized we have to reserve the seats for the female leaders because they can create from different angles, different diversities to create a better world and sustainable growth for the economy. So that's why we have requested in the whole program to reserve a certain female intake of students as well. Yeah. So again, I think if you have better ideas to empower those programs, feel free to let us know because we will definitely want to do more from that perspective.
Very interesting point, Cherry, that you mentioned. Sorry, Catheryn, but I'm just dying to ask her this question. In the sense that, Cherry, we in tourism have been talking about moving tourism away from city centers to peripheral areas, moving it away so that money will be diversified from city centers to out, and we are looking at how can we bring digitalization to women leaders, women entrepreneurs in the peripheral areas so that we can gear up when tourism opens up in a COVID resilient or post-COVID recovery world. So taking your experience from other industries, I know your company has done a lot. Can you share with us in the tourism industry some transferable learning, some transferable outcomes that we could look forward to? What kind of collaborations can we do in our tourism industry?
Yeah, I think that I have to say that this is not a very well prepared question, but I would love to answer it. I think one of the things is that maybe I'm back to my industry again, is that because I came from tourism industry, I used to be a tourism guide during my university time. So I love to travel to the remote area. And one of the things is definitely adoption of digital payment. I think, again, Southeast Asian government have done a tremendous good job to promote the QR-based payment because, again, with the QR code, you can just scan, you can make the payment. It's much cheaper compared to a traditional POS machine-based payment. I think digital payment is one of the first adoption to make sure that you can be more related to the digital world. The second part, what we can see is definitely sales marketing. And the traditional or sales marketing to selling your product actually has to be changed to know your customer, know the target customer, both online and offline, to engage with them. So that we're helping actually to a lot of SMEs, especially in the rural area, to contact to the real world instead of only in the large corporate for it. I think, but on the other hand, for this, it's a lot of education, a lot of training has to be behind. I have to say, we have introduced as a company a lot of technical platforms, enable them to be on the, for example, Alipay app, through the mini programs, so they can create their own mini app, a mini site, instead of introduce a full-fledged app, which can cost you a lot of money for it. But however, to introduce such a program, need the right for the training, right education for those SMEs to really catch up with the trend of this digital. So from my side, I'm very passionate to see, I think these are the two starting point for a lot of SMEs can adopt the digital world.
Yeah, great, Terry. I think this is also a starting point for us to start working together, because I'm actually working with World Women Tourism, and we've actually we're looking at a project to be a bit more inclusive in terms of digital financial services for women in rural Nepal and Bhutan. So we'll be talking to you after this, Cherry.
Yeah, definitely. It's in my area as well. Perfect.
That'd be good. And also, any members of the audience who are listening in and listening to what Cherry is doing, and also Pratima and Aradhana, if you want to reach out and you want to collaborate and you want to work together and you want to extend your resources to enabling empowered women, please definitely reach out to any one of them or us. And I want to channel this question to you, Pratima. I see a lot of similarities, or at least a crossover between what you do at Microsoft with Cherry, correct me if I'm wrong, but you talked about skilling for the future, being a core element for enabling empowered women. What is it that you and Microsoft are doing? How are you thinking about this? Have you done anything concrete, actionable? Tell us.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, as I was hearing you talk, I realized that, there is skilling is really the currency for the future, and it's such a critical building block, especially when we're talking about national recovery and the work that we're doing around sustainable recovery. So as I heard you talk, Cherry, as well as Nisha, and, I was thinking that, digital skills could be the one thing that we can look at in addition to all the other activities that we need to do in initiatives. But digital skills could be a critical piece to pave the way forward. And as a society, we need to first of all work very hard to ensure that these skills are more easily available. There are huge opportunities for all of us to really empower people, especially in underrepresented groups or areas in today's digital economy. And the reality, actually, as we go forward, I think, I think you touched upon it, is that almost every job will require some digital skills as we go forward. And the supply and the demand is super mismatched. There is huge mismatch between these two things. And that's where government agencies can actually come in to make long-term societal improvement in developing skills and talent. Because it's the people who will drive this transformation, and skilling is going to be the currency. So I think as leaders, especially cross-functional and cross-industry, I don't think this is only tourism, but yes, in tourism also it's very critical. We need to make access to education, to training, to the technology really very, very easy. Right from K through 12, school children onwards, so that people can actually access that digital skills training. We ourselves have launched multiple digital skilling initiatives, and we work with the top customers in Southeast Asia and partners to actually bridge that digital divide and try and help people. So, for example, we made a commitment to skill 1 million people in Malaysia and 24 million in Indonesia as part of our work with that country. We have launched something called the Global Skilling Initiative. You can just go up and look up for that, where we have trained on digital skills over 48 million learners worldwide. And all of these are building blocks to help skill, upskill, and reskill people. I think all three things are important. And that's the area that we are in now. LinkedIn is also something that you could please definitely tap on because there are many, many things there. For example, something like graphs and data, where you can look at what are the economics and where are the skills required. So you can actually look at both these things and then decide what to do. So I would definitely also, building on Aradhana's point, encourage us to leverage this data to make those considered decisions. So in conclusion, I will say, long answer to your short question, but in conclusion, I would say that governments must look at investing in digital skilling and that, build the mindset of building a talented pipeline. And all of us have a role to play in trying to see how we could develop that citizen employability and revitalizing the economy using digital skills.
Yeah. Thanks, Pratima, because as I listen to you, I'm thinking about the role of today governments or even companies like yourself or large chains, whether they should put out more grants out there, more scholarships or more, some kind of initiatives for organizations to say, let's train more women from our industry, and we are also facing another problem in the tourism industry that some of you may be aware is that we are letting more and more of the technological companies come into our industry and take away some of our services in our ecosystem, and we blame them for coming in, but not realizing that it's not that they are coming in to take the opportunity, but it's just that we are not seizing the opportunity that is already available, and that is because there's a lack of awareness, there's a lack of competency and skills, digital skills and literacy, and it's time for us to address that and not sit back, wait for the tech guys to come in and take over what is in this industry. Right. But again, I just want to jump in here and ask Aradhana a question. When, of course, you were talking about, Pratima, and Cherry, about women leaders and female leaders should come in and be a decision making. But I want to also shift the focus and ask Aradhana about entrepreneurship, which I think is one of the major keys to female and women empowerment. And, you are an entrepreneur, you have seen other entrepreneurs, but can you share your advice on how we can navigate this ecosystem that is often set up by men and for men? and what are some of your views on the slow progress? Why?
Sure. Nisha, if you wouldn't mind, I will answer your question. If you give me 30 seconds, please, to rope in the question that Catheryn had asked early on and that you touched upon, if I can give my 2 cents on it. Catheryn, I don't have case studies of people who are really doing a good job out there, because I think that was your original question. I know there are countries in Africa who are doing a phenomenal job as far and wide as Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, who have initiated specific mandates and efforts which have proven results on the ground. But I don't know if there is one good case study which answers your question. I think it's enormously encouraging what I heard from Pratima and Cherry in terms of what the corporate world is doing. But here's my 2 cents of doom and gloom, guys. 80% of our sector is small, medium, micro enterprises. The vast majority of women who work in the APAC region in travel and tourism work in informal employment. What we need is for the governments to step in. We can't absolve them of their responsibility here. They need to step up and ensure there is a vertical segregation happening. Look, the conversation about women in labor force participation is one. We need the governments to ensure there is vertical segregation, because all the women who work in our sector are in the lowest levels of hierarchy as we speak. They don't have any form of social protection. So forget about digital training and whatever, they don't have the basics. Can we have rules? Can we have legislation which provides them access to banking, access to financing? Women fail at the outset before they start anything because they are the primary caregivers. So unless we have childcare, which is subsidized, unless women can rid themselves of the burden of looking after the children or the elderly or their families or whatever else, there is no way we can solve this problem. That was my first bit. I now want to go on to what you asked me about entrepreneurship, which I feel really, really passionate about. Look, women don't have a lack of ideas. We have ideas by the minute, right? Where do we struggle as women entrepreneurs? We struggle with funding. And if you look at the data, so bad are the statistics that in 2020, only 2.5% of all the funding done by VC firms went to women-led firms, 2.5%, and 2021 isn't any better. And when money doesn't flow to women startups, what happens is we start thinking it's something that we are doing wrong, right? Because we're champions at doubting ourselves. Yeah. So if there are women entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs listening in, I want to tell you, as a female entrepreneur, I'm a serial entrepreneur, you can be extremely successful if you put the right strategies to work and bring a different mindset. Now, what do I mean by this? Number one, be authentic, guys. I know it's easier said than done, but what happens is a lot of female entrepreneurs who pitch for funding have been taught to fundraise and deliver a pitch in a style which is suited for men. Why? Because most investors, coaches, mentors all tend to be men. And those who are listening to the pitch also tend to be men. So women are unknowingly pitching our business in a way so men understand. But that's not necessarily you, right? And it could be forced, it could be unnatural. So I say break the mold, go completely crazy in a way that highlights your strengths, even if that means deviating from the script. That's number one. Number two, don't compromise too much early on, right? Investment is a two-way street. So what happens as women is we're inherently givers. And we often walk into a meeting, if we get funding from this meeting, that'll be absolutely amazing. But you risk that you might end up with an investor who's not aligned to your values. You risk the fact that actually your business might be killed by that investor coming on board. So think of every meeting as an opportunity. So you get to know the other person to see if your mission is aligned, if your values are aligned, and don't go in desperate to get that investment, if that makes sense. I know it's easy for me to say this, and I know I am a sorry mess myself when things don't go my way. And God knows there are so many days when I feel less than adequate, least of all ready to take the world. But I do try to think of everything as, in the worst case, it will be a learning. In the best case, it will be a blessing. And finally, I think this is very important. Don't be shy, guys. Don't play like how we are socialized to play, which is play nice, right? We are unduly modest when it comes to sharing our accomplishments. Why? Because we think it's self-promotion. There are women founders who will not share how well they are doing, how much revenue they're already generating, or how well they're looking after their teams. We neglect these key stuff because it feels self-serving. Don't be shy. And don't emulate a style which isn't you. I mean, you might be judged for it, so be it, but at least you would have done it your way.
Absolutely.
Aradhana,
brilliant.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's an empowered woman speaking right there. What I want to do is, there are questions from the audience, and I would like to bring in Prachi from World Women Tourism. She's been collating your questions, members of the audience. Prachi, please, the floor is yours. We have about 5 minutes. So got to be quick. If we have time for more than one or two questions, that would be fantastic.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I am Prachi Thakur, and I'm a diversity strategist at World Women Tourism, and I'm here with some of the key questions that I have gathered. First of all, thank you so much, all the women here. You blew my mind with all the information. So I want to begin with a compliment that came in chat box about, being empowered women as a strong term. But that lady writes that it is a fitting term for a woman who is full-time mother, working full-time, and at the same time household managers. And these women with these kind of situations often let opportunities pass them until later age, and they add on. First thing I want to tell this lady is that empowered woman is the term you want to go by. As Aradhana said, we are unduly modest when it comes to, acknowledging our own contributions. So it's high time we stop doing that. But the question to the panel is, this kind of statement also points out to what are we doing in the industry about the intersectionalities that women hold, like age. One of the key points in this comment is about, women leaving the opportunities as they get older with age. I will like any one of you to take up that question and answer that. How do we deal with the intersectionality in the women's arena?
In other words, have there been, in the policies and strategies and actionable strategies that you talk about, Cherry, Aradhana, and Pratima, in all of those things, have you looked at the ages of these women and how old they are coming into the workforce? Nisha, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Even if when it comes to digital transformation, digital literacy training, would age be a factor that we need to consider when we design our training programs?
So I'm just going to take a small stab at it, guys. A fascinating question. It's not something I thought of when I did my research to see how does age play into this. But here's my 2 cents. In travel and tourism, the women who enter the workforce are in their early 20s and they stay. They stay till it becomes the time for them to get married and have the babies. And because there is no social structure to support that caregiver responsibility financially and from an infrastructure point of view, that's when we see the steep fall. So if I look at my numbers from 200 companies, 54% becomes 40% already by the time they are at mid-level management, which is at a senior manager in a hotel operation, as an example. And then that flows to 33%, which is what a general manager would be, or as an SVP in a hospitality operation. So clearly, marriage and having the first baby and then the second baby is the breaking point. Are there women then coming back in their 40s when the kids are settled to take on the reins in leadership in hospitality? Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, no. Also because it's our sector where we say, oh, how many years of experience do you have? 25. Okay, then you deserve to be here. So if you've had 10 or 15 years of experience and then took a break and then you've come back, you'll have to start at the bottom. So it's just not structured because bear in mind, we're still working in a brick and mortar fashion, which is quite dated.
But again, it could also be, sorry, but I was just thinking, Aradhana, it could also be that, the top management staff tend to be more male, and if we have more female role models at the top level, I think that would help to lift more women, even if they come back into the workforce after taking a break, because they understand as role models that such provision should be made or structures should be incorporated into an organization. Yeah. Sorry, over to you, Catheryn. Yeah.
No, but but this is an uncomfortable question, and this is an uncomfortable discussion. But it doesn't mean we have to shy away from it. If we haven't done it, now is the time to do so. I remember that when we went into enabling women in rural Mexico, we had 3 generations of women. So this woman who is in her late 20s, she came with a little child in her arm, but she also came with her mother who was in her 60s. She came because her mother and her were in a business together, and that training was to enable digital entrepreneurship, and we included as a support person, a person who are in business with the woman. And so we managed to include this woman in her 60s who was so keen to learn. She was empowered, but she needed to be enabled. So here is a question we can all think about. Here's a solution we can all think about: how to include more of these women who have until now not been visible, even though they are empowered. Prachi, have you got another question?
Yes, thank you so much, Catheryn. I just want to pick one, a bit on what Aradhana was mentioning about the need for support. And one of the key things which we, for a little bit context, that I wrote a gender report for women in tourism with Catheryn this year. And one of the key findings we had was the lack of structural support for women in tourism. So when often we talk about the solutions we have for women, we talk about very specific tourism-centered things, but we also need more, circumferential things to support that advancement, if I may add. Another question I have is actually targeted to Aradhana. The audience asked that, is it possible for us to have the data, for audience to have the data that speaker Khowala was sharing together with the best practice? So basically the audience is asking if they can have data.
Absolutely. Please just Google Global Institute for Women in Leadership. It is chaired by the former Prime Minister of Australia, Julia Gillard, here in King's College in London. You can get the entire report. It's completely for free. That's the first report. And if you go up on the website, aptamind.com, you have the gender diversity report on my website, which is very focused on the travel, tourism, and hospitality sector that I referred to in my talk.
Thank you so much. So I have one question for Pratima. I'll take it. This is the last question we have, is that you mentioned about inclusion being the core of the future and the decision-making in future. What is one key strategy you recommend for small business owners to enable their decision-making through data? So what do you recommend for small and medium enterprises?
Fantastic question, great. And I would like to just generally say that, look, cloud data and AI are playing a big role in trusted and secure and inclusive recovery. So I don't think innovation or growth is really limited only for the very large enterprises. I've seen real examples of extremely innovative startups who are bringing on new things. So adoption of cloud, adoption of tech is really good. So all this means really, and as Aradhana has also been saying, data is really the most strategic asset that you can have. And whether you're in a state or a private company or an academic institution or a small business, I think, next 3 years we will create more data than what we've created in 10. So it's not the lack of data, it's what we need to make out of that data, the insight that you will gather from that. So no matter how big or small the company is, what can you do to be able to build some sort of a power with the analytics that you have, and the predictive power of this analytics is really what I think is important. But I have to say again, my view is that the bigger picture, policy recommendations, digital governance, there is activity that governments across the world need to sit down and actually think about how to deliver the social value and help women communities with that, digital governance. So it's super critical for the fabric to be created for businesses of all sizes to be able to flourish and make intelligent decisions. I hope it makes sense.
It did. Thank you so much, Pratima. Over to you, Catheryn.
Yeah, I wish we could keep on conversing about this. There's been a lot of fire in this room. And the purpose of this deep dive workshop is never to give answers. I think we want to generate more questions than answers. I think it's time for us to question. It's time for us to question paradigms and what has been happening. And I think this is a new conversation about enabling empowered women rather than just talking about empowering and empowering. I hope this deep dive conversation that we have would shift the conversations in other conferences. And we really hope to engage more. And this is just the beginning, it's not the end. And I believe that we are going to be seeing more of each other, more collaborations. And I really want to thank ADV here, because this conversation we have here started as early as December. It's like 4 to 5 months of hard work. We've been identifying speakers, and we have some of the best speakers in this room. We had gone through a scrutiny of saying who would be the best to address questions like what we have in this room today. And we have amazing, amazing insights from, we have Pratima, thank you so much for being here with us. Cherry, appreciate your time. We know how busy you are. And Aradhana, we know what a fire you are in any room that you enter, and you are so busy. So I thank the three of you. And of course, for Catheryn, Special Advisor to UNWTO and our advisor as always. And of course, Prachi, who has been anchoring this. She has been our backbone, and she has been pulling this through since December. With that, thank you so much. And we are indeed looking forward to more conversations, more partnerships, more collaborations in enabling the empowered women. So with that, thank you so much. Nisha from Singapore. Goodbye.